All right, good afternoon, everyone. You're attending the Overcoming the Impacts of the Negative Call Experiences with Branded Calling. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter session, so it's going to run here from 3:10 up until about 3:45. For the panel today, we've got Sean Cattell, who's VP of Sales Enablement for First Orion. And we've got Lou Friedman, who's a little bit detained, hasn't quite made it on to the session yet. So if Lou has an opportunity to join, we'll bring him on for the panel as we're going. And then myself, Mick Monta, is the moderator here for today, the Director of Product Management for Neustar. So thanks everyone for joining. Really from a view of what we're going to go through today is a little bit of background on Branded Call Display. Sean and I have a demo we'll run real quick on what an example brand display can look like, the panel perspective. So Sean and I will kick some questions back and forth between us. And then for anyone in the group who's joined that has questions, we can pick those up along the way and answers at the end for a Q&A session. So really the main problem that we're trying to address when we think about outbound calls to the mobile space is this tends to be this right-hand side, this just telephone number showing up on the inbound display. This is really what tends to happen as a default consumer experience on most of the outbound calls. So if you're an enterprise making those outbound attempts, you're getting to your client base, and unless they've added that phone number to the mobile phone itself, a lot of times just the phone number is going to display, making it difficult for the consumer to understand who it is and if it's something that I should be or interested in picking up. You know, add in the additional headwinds that we all get a lot of calls that are unwanted in those cases. I mean, I even got a car warranty call this morning, so those are still up and running again. So, you know, you're trying to, within that 3 to 5 seconds, make a determination if it is someone that I want to answer the phone and talk to. And so what we're looking at doing from a branded call experience standpoint is how can we change that? How can we position ourselves in the industry as a whole to help that consumer experiences so that outbound enterprise call has the best chance possible for individuals to not only know who they are, but in a lot of these cases, who they're calling. Branded Call Display with the partnership that we have between Neustar and First Orion, with the ability to personalize that mobile screen. In some of these examples here, you see where you've got the company name display. You see in this example where the calling about reason is health benefits. And then you've also got a logo image of the enterprise in this example as well. So it gives you really clear, defined information on that inbound display so that you're able to make that informed decision. And as we progress in the industry and as we're able to get mass and scale on devices that can show imaging, along with call reason and the name itself, also gives some room for personalization in this case. So on the right-hand side here, you see we've even got an employee headshot that's on there along with the company information. So if you're working with an individual within that enterprise, you're able to tell right away that, hey, this is someone that I know who's calling, I'm willing to engage with and go from there. Hey, Sean, so before we sort of get into a demo, I'll kind of go through some initial questions so does Branded Call Display work? You know, is it something that's possible today?
That's a good question to start with. The answer to that is yes, absolutely. I don't think First Orion or Neustar would be as successful as we are and working together if it didn't. We have tons of customers processing millions and millions of phone calls for all of our solutions combined, and branded calling is a big part of that, and it's an up and coming part of it as well. So yes, absolutely, it does exist. It exists and it works very well. It's solving problems for a lot of customers, not just in the initial pickup, but also in that long-term engagement with the customer, particularly when it comes to calling them back, right? Because not everybody can pick the phone up right away. But if they happen to see that it is your insurance company calling, they can make that educated decision to call back at a later time because they know it's not an urgent, pressing matter. So yes, absolutely, it works, and it works very well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Sean. So when we talk about the inbound screen being lit up during call time, that is sort of your first opportunity. But, you know, as you look at some of the verticals, you know, take pharmacy, for example. So if I get that reminder for a pharmacy call, I may not even necessarily need to answer it, but it's going to tell me that, hey, I've got a prescription I need to go pick up. There could be cases where I might be a little bit late on a bill in those cases. And that reminder, just to show that it's that enterprise reaching out to me, might be like, you know what, you need to go log in, you need to go make that payment and make sure that I'm back up to date. So yeah, we've seen a lot of just past the call answer rate, just past the contact rate itself, where we've seen a lot of success in the ability to help drive, promise to pays, conversions, in that case, in that pharmacy, the ability to pick up more prescriptions. So Sean, should we do a demo? You want to give that a try and see what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we'll setting up here for this demo, just making sure I'm not on mute. Setting up for this demonstration is just a call to your cell phone, Mick. So I'm going to
Yep, that's right.
Do that right now. So there's the call to Mick. Oh, there we go. So
there we go. So we got
First Orion and do it for Pace ACX. Yeah, the fully color lit background.
Absolutely. Yep, for sure. And so, and then as this answers, and then I'll hang it back up. So what's cool about this is you also got it in the call history, right? As I go back in there and look, you'll see information and details that, hey, this was First Orion that was in there. So that gives you that great leave behind in that sense. And then at the time I received that call, it gave me information of who you were and why you were calling, and plenty of time for me to make decisions on answering that call. So yeah. So Sean, when we talk about the different display types, and I'll reshare my screen here that shows kind of the examples that we've outlined, but let me make sure I grab the right one. Yeah, so what are some of the options that we can do in the industry that allows us to, not only show that name information and imaging, what does that look like from being able to utilize the handset itself? So I know one of the images you've got set up for here showed that First Orion in the background, but I know I've seen some demos where you guys have had, a lot of background information, a lot of contextual details to be able to show on that inbound branded.
Yeah, really, sky's the limit, but that's very much relative to how much you want to disrupt the customer experience. And that is something that we think a lot about. And I encourage everybody on this panel conversation listening in to consider is, entry to your customer, access to your customer, and their willingness to engage with you. It has everything to do with how much you disrupt their day-to-day life versus how much you just fit right in. So we have a multitude of solutions. The two that we're talking about right now would be fully branded. As you see here, there's an actual picture showing up, not just text. But sometimes that text is more than enough, and it allows you to deliver that content to a customer with a minimal intrusion on their day-to-day experience. No apps to download or anything like that. So the text-based solution allows you to play with over 30 characters on screen, so you can still get context. If this is Sean's auto glass calling about your installation to let you know your car's complete, you'll see, you could put the context Sean's glass, car ready, for example. Those are things you can do without having to do a full screen takeover, and those work right in network, right? So no apps to download on the device. The customer doesn't have to accept any extra permissions, which is massive, particularly for a company that's trying to make sure that the brand is well known in the phone call and even outside of the phone call and in the call log, for example. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think this, I think that really adds into the question I'm seeing on here. Do you need an IO dialer for this tech? And I think the short answer is for the ability to land identity, to get imaging on that phone, absolutely not. This is something that we can do without having to have heavy IT integration, something that the industry is set up to be able to push up to that 30 character, as you said, and be able to drive just off that alone. Now, once you do start some of those integrations where we do some API enhancements, we help set up the experience to where we can see it from a contact center, that's where we can really start leveraging more content in those places. And I think that's where it starts doing a few things. One is It allows easier access to get imaging out there to those devices, seeing that request come from the originator contact center. And then I think is, depending on the vertical that each of the groups are in here, it starts to talk about, is it a trusted communication call? So I know there's a lot of situations where we definitely want to have more identity in place. We want to be able to show an enriched environment, but we also want to make sure it's done to where someone can't come in, hijack that number, take control of the identity and use it for nefarious means. And so one other extra insights, if you're doing in some of the integration work within the contact center side, is it also gives you some authentication capabilities. And with the implementations that we have between Neustar and First Orion, we can do this in a way to where only the enterprise gets credit for their branding. And if some other group were to try to come in there and use that imaging or branding for their own, we wouldn't give them credit for it. We wouldn't display it. We wouldn't show it that way. And then as you kind of even press further, depending on the environment that you're in, it gives you options to where you can really control when you want to use that imaging versus not. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's I just a quick comment on that, if I may, Mick. For everybody listening, again, be very cautious about what companies you work with when it comes to branding anything. It's easy. I would say that technology-wise, the easy part is probably getting the text or the image to show up. The hard part is getting that to show up for the right reason, for the right person, the right time, and without disrupting your brand. So you're spending a lot of money making sure that your brand shows up right in all of these different digital and physical touch points. You don't want some bad actor stepping in and taking that over. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got another question that have came in here is, what are the trends on live answer rates, some of the sales metrics, CSAT scores, and then there's also a follow-up on inbound applications that are in there. I've got a slide that gives some information on where we are with some early results within the industry. So this should be popping up now. Sean, are you showing that on your side as well? We've got the key stats across. Okay, perfect. So we've tried to, in these early stages of branding that we've been running towards vast majority of this year, and I know from First Orion standpoint, you guys have been off and running and doing this a little bit longer. We look across some of the just answer rates as an initial indicator in some of the areas, and we're seeing finance, insurance, retailers, opinion survey, rideshare. We also, on the Neustar side, we've got a lot of healthcare as well in those cases. And as you can see, we're seeing some pretty significant answer rate improvements on a lot of those. But we've got cases to where we've seen, even in case where it's a smaller answer rate improvement, maybe 15%, maybe 20%, but yet we see that promise to pay might have went up 30% in those cases. So it is very highly situational. It's hard to sort of paint a one big brush stroke across all the different groups that we work with and all the different enterprises, but we certainly see a lot of cases to where the impacts start with an initial look at answer rate, but then also want to be mindful of all the other metrics that come in, including those important ones like promise to pays and CSAT scores. From an inbound application, technology will allow us to be able to use this for a variety of ways. Whether it's bringing and looking at it from an inbound solution, there's technology-wise would allow options down the road to be able to help someone running a contact center to be able to have their floor see information and from those consumers calling, and that's leveraging that data both directions at that point. We can also use this information to look at more post-call details as well. We've kind of talked about this a little bit to where outside of the voice channel itself, we have opportunities where you could interact either through an SMS, through a chat bot. Could be cases to where you could go a click to link on a website on some of this post-call details and really allow you to use this in more of a rich enterprise function for communications versus just the voice call itself. Let me see here. So let me see other questions we have. Or Sean, did you have any other comments that you want to mention along those lines?
Yeah, I'm actually going to tie it back to, I think it was Chuck's question previously around the auto dialer. I know you already answered that you don't need an auto dialer for this, but so we're just talking about answer rates, high level is one indication of lift, if you will, or a change before and after that can take place here. But one other thing to really think about is if you are using an auto dialer, make sure that, and maybe you're using email marketing on top of that. So if you have an auto dialer and you have branded calling enabled, and you're also doing email marketing, pay attention to your open rates and your click-through rates and your emails, because again, they don't have to answer the phone. So you might see the answer rates might stay flat. I'm going to say something really taboo here, but maybe they go down. But that doesn't necessarily mean that engagement goes down. We really got to look at that big picture. We see this all the time, that we get customers coming to us and saying, hey, we're seeing some flat numbers here, and we'll point them to their email attachment rates at the same time a phone call was made or within 5 minutes, and their open rates are through the roof. So there's a total circular economy of engagement that comes into play here to increase NPS and CSAT scores beyond just the answer rates.
So Sean, would you say that's sort of the unexpected findings as we go into this? Because I think eyes wide open, we all approach brand with, hey, put information on the phone, more people answer. But as we started peeling back those layers, it's more about what improves the overall customer experience and really helps the enterprise drive the means to get to the end of that call result. And whether that happens at the time of the call or someone going in and answering afterwards, or really while maybe my answer rate didn't go up, but my conversions did, I think we're still thumbs up in this area. I think we're good in a sense to where we've helped move the overall business. We've helped clear it with consumers. And at the end of the day, if someone sees information on the phone and it's not something they want to answer, then you've really sort of almost have efficiency gains, right? Because in this case, it's a individual who may have answered and then just hung back up, or maybe not had a great experience where they can make that decision at the time versus having to answer and then try to figure out who it is when they pick up during call time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I like what you said there, an unexpected finding, an unexpected improvement, and that's very much the case.
Yeah, for sure. So get another question in here. What are the answer rate improvements? Is the answer rate improvement customer or acquisition calls? So I think Sean and I, we both within our organizations have instances of both. So I'll even though Lou wasn't able to join from InterFirst Mortgage, I can kind of give his as an example. So InterFirst Mortgage does lead-based work. So people that are interested in new mortgages or refinances, when they came to Newstar, when Lou and InterFirst came in to talk about Newstar solutions, one of the problem was I'm having trouble getting my calls answered in those cases. And through getting that branding on the phone to at least have it show InterFirst Mortgage, the individual that had applied and that had put in for that lead-based callback, it connects the dots. Where before it was, I'm getting a phone call, I don't know who it is. 5-10 minutes later, an hour later, I may have done that submission. So this allows that to tie together and make it easier for everyone. And through that process and having InterFirst adopt that, they've used it across all their different campaigns now. So they do it for lead base, they do it for follow-ups. They do it in those cases to where we see a lot of their traffic coming through. That's helped that company in terms of identity. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tack on to that too. Customer acquisition calls. We regularly work with customers who are, kind of working on both sides, if you will. It might start with a post-sale, post-acquisition follow-up call, and they see the benefits there, and then it moves to the acquisition team, and sooner or later we have the whole organization running branded calling through for all of their phone numbers. So we try to look at answer rates across the board to answer that question directly. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So I got a lot of questions coming in. So I know as we're kind of getting a little bit towards the tail end of this discussion here. So anyone, keep sending us questions. We'll make sure we can get them answered offline. So one of them I'm seeing come in here that I'm seeing is, does branded work with stir shaken? How do you maintain integrity of that branded call when someone eagerly spoofs a number? I think it's really important, and the ability to make sure that you're only getting credit for those calls versus someone that's nefarious in nature or legally spoofing that call. So in this case, we do use stir shaking protocols. We use a lot of cases to where we absolutely want to see that authenticated requests come from the enterprise, come from their contact center. We do that through a variety of ways. We do it through some API integrations. We can also look at some of the organic scoring that's being done on the carrier space for stir shaking. And by doing that, we know for sure that it's really the enterprise making those phone calls versus another entity. And then the next step is then we can do a decision tree against it. So if I see that it's a authenticated call, then I can go ahead and push forward with the branding, whether that just be the imaging, the name itself. But on the other hand, if I'm not seeing a stir shaking compliant call, if I'm seeing a lower attestation value, or I don't see a definitive request come from that contact center, it allows us to then hold back the branding and the imaging. And so essentially that way, and there's going to be some real important use cases. Think about your financial institution that might have a fraud alert. You always want to make sure that's coming from that institution versus someone who might be trying to use it for harm. And so we only want to display that positive imaging when it's in place versus others. Yeah. Sean, anything to add there?
Well, I think you answered one of the next questions, actually. Can branded calls still get labeled with spam, scam, or fraud? And the answer to that is absolutely. That's perhaps, I think that's more important than just labeling, blanketing the entire call flow and saying every call gets branded here. So yeah, I think the question just before that is one that's really, really interesting to me, Mick, around answer rates, response rates, branded versus unbranded. Do you mind if I take that one?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so question here, can you talk about the rates of call answer responses with branded versus unbranded calls? By what percentage are you seeing improvements from one to the other? I think what you've got here on screen is a really good sampling of what the lift can be. Some on the low side, some on the high side. Going back to what Mick and I were talking about previously, there's even cases where we've seen them. I know, again, this sounds taboo to say because it sounds like it's counterproductive to our sales model, but they can stay flat. And that's okay. It's not necessarily that it's a bad thing for the business. It's what other metrics are they improving? Generally, when we see that, we see conversion rates go up. Conversions could be on somebody filling out a form, booking an appointment, getting a meeting scheduled, walking out the front door to greet the delivery driver because they can't find the house. All of those things should be taken into consideration. So on the high side, we've seen answer rates go into the 80s, 80% improvement before and after. And on the low side, flat to, just fractions of a percent increase. But again, we're always looking at that post-call engagement, answer conversions, and even return call rates for that matter.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a great segue on one of the questions here that talks about that post-call engagement. Do we have mobile messaging fallback options where you might be able to do cross-channel, where you go to SMS or MMS or use an RCS type? And I think the short answer is the focus in the partnership between Neustar and First Orion has been getting the ability to display at scale, either by the name itself or imaging. And then our next goal is to start looking at that is how can we better help the customer experience and give them other options. So as we work on our roadmaps here in 2022 and beyond, we definitely want to get there. We definitely want to allow those options to where it's just not the call time event or the ability to see it in the contact list, to where you might be able to interact and do more with what we call that post-call content. There's been some early pilots in the industry where we've seen some landing pages that give you some interaction options once the call attempt is over. And I think that's really critical. And I think it's going to really help drive more focus for the businesses to where they have a lot more options to engage just out of that real-time call attempt. All right, so Casey, how are we doing time-wise? Good place to wrap. Want to make sure we're doing okay with everyone's group. I know we've got a break here, but I do want to be mindful that everyone has a chance to get into that break time and catch up.
Yeah, you've got about probably 7 minutes left if you still have some things you'd like to cover. Or I'll see if there's any more questions.
Perfect.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sean, where do we see things from, anything you want to share from the First Orion side for things that you're excited about heading into next year, and anything that you want to mention on this call?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to adoption and being able to get that fully branded experience, fully branded meaning, logo, full color display, you name it. Yep. Candidly, that does take a little bit more from the end consumer. And I think what we're looking forward to is an expansion of RCD capability where that's not a requirement, where it's ubiquitous and anybody can really take full advantage of these capabilities, yep, regardless of business size, for that matter, right? Maybe even for personal use. Who knows? There's a lot going on with this. I think transparency is kind of what this is all about, and putting the power in the consumer's hands to make sure that they can make an informed decision on whether they want to engage with that business, but also for that matter, giving the power back to the enterprises to understand how those customers are or maybe are not engaging with them, and making better, more informed decisions about communication paths, if you will, whether it be phone, email, text, chat. The phone call for sure is one that we're extremely interested in, but we also recognize that it's not for everybody. There was a question that was popped into the comment section just a moment ago that I can't remember exactly what it said, but results differing based on wireless carriers. You got to think about that. You got to think about the demographics of who's using an iPhone and Android. And I don't just mean like traditional demographics that people would immediately jump to. I just mean, how do they want to communicate? Are they more apt to take a phone call or text message or email, or use a phone call as a prompt, as a follow-up to those other things? So I'm really excited about what we're doing on the analytics side to help inform enterprises and make better, more informed decisions around those things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know some of the collaborative work that we're doing between Neustar and First Orion, and also some of the areas that we're focusing on with some of the Neustar development is, make it easy for the client to be able to go in and know how they're doing in terms of, how many times has my branding made it out to my client base. There could be situations where certain campaigns may not always want to have branding on, depending on how things are going, and also from a budgetary aspect of being able to run a program like this. So having those options of when to turn on numbers and off, and also being able to know sort of how successful this has been in terms of reach out to the different carriers and distribution points that we share. Let me think. One other area I was going to touch on real quickly. So Sean, I'm an enterprise. I want to jump into this. How easy is it to get started, to at least get identity on that device? What would need to, how quickly could that be done to be off and running?
If you kind of remove depending on the enterprise, of course, that's the blanket response. It depends, but in all honesty, it really only takes a few minutes for a phone number to be set up, validated, and pushed through to where you can be making a branded phone call, if you will. And then maintenance of that, if you never change out your phone numbers, and you really, you may not need to, the upkeep is non-existent. It's kind of like the old, home shopping network shows. You set it and you forget it, and that's really the case. So a few minutes and it's just up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got cases of that where, enterprise has got a campaign need that's coming up really soon, or they really got to quickly get something spun up. And within a day we're up and going, and we're good, and they're able to see that extra identity out to the marketplace. I got one more question that I'll answer here, and then I'll close down for this session. And I thank everyone for joining here. So Chuck's asking a really good question here. If an agent is making outbound calls for multiple brands, how would that work? It's a great question. So right now, a lot of our identity is based on a per number basis to be able to set up almost, if you think about a profile for an individual number, we have options that are being looked at to where we can make situational branding decisions on those. And Sean, share your perspective where First Orion is. We know it's not always going to be a direct number to profile linkage. So right now, the feedback we'd usually give is, hey, you've got a number doing a set campaign, we're good. If the same number is doing multiple, we got to make some decisions for now. But down the road, we think on a per by call basis, we'll be able to make some of those profile decisions.
Yeah, the same is true for First Orion's technology in general. Right, we look at it at the per call level if need be, and even before that, we not just multiple brands, but one brand, multiple departments. It's a very similar concept here. So there are tools and capabilities built into our solutions where if you want a different experience for a different department, which is often beneficial for a lot of reasons, you can do that in addition to managing multiple brands. And we do have a number of customers who represent additional brands below them, if you will, from a hierarchical perspective. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, Sean, I really appreciate you joining and partaking today. I'll kind of leave it with, any questions that come in or even post after this session. Sean and I can help answer and get those back out. Appreciate Pace setting this up for us. Casey, I appreciate you being the administrator. If there's any other questions, you can go to home.newstar.bcd, and then certainly had fun. Sean, it's great rapping with you. It was great having conversation over Art of the Possible and everything that's up and running right now.
Absolutely. Pleasure's all mine. And thanks for all the great questions, everybody.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you all.